My name is Lewis Pope. I am the head security nerd at Enable. I previously was in a sales engineer role here for a few years, but prior to that, I was with an MSP myself. I went from a story that a lot of you may be familiar with. We started out as break fix. We eventually matured into the full MSP model. Did that over about a 6-year time frame before I took an opportunity with Enable. So I've had the opportunity. I have been on both sides of the conversation here. I have been spent a lot more time in your seat than I have in my seat today. So as I'm going through things today, I'm going to try and make sure that I'm making things very applicable and actionable in the sense of I'm not going to give you this giant esoteric discussion about security and then tell you, well, you go figure it all the rest for yourself. I'm hoping to get you started, get you pointed in the right directions on certain things. So you have some things you can do today. You'll have some things you can do tomorrow, and you can start planning for the future. All right. So, and also, I've got my contact information up on the screen. Don't worry about trying to write that down or keep track of it. I also have a handouts in GoToWebinar, the Security Bootcamp Extra Resources. If you attended the session yesterday, you already have this. If you did not, make sure you grab this. A lot of useful links available for you. And then there's also my contact information in there. And again, for anybody that's having audio issues, check out the sound check. All right, so what are we going to be covering today? We're covering advanced security. So this is just a step up from what we were covering yesterday. We're going to get a little bit more specific about certain things and some other items in here that are kind of pertinent to the overall security conversation. We're going to be talking about vulnerability life cycle for the technicians and the engineers and the help desk people that are in the trenches every day. I'm going to be probably going over a bunch of things you've already know, but I may be contextualizing them in some ways that you never thought of. And if you are more in the managerial level, your ops manager, owner, president, supervisor, and you're not so much in the technical minutia of everything that happens day to day, well, I might be opening up your eyes to some of the challenges and the actual bandwidth required to achieve some of these things. We'll also be touching on security frameworks, what they are, building to your own versus using an existing one, and letting it drive standardization. We'll also be covering some system hardening information. So what is system hardening? Why is it important? Challenges of hardening and how to standardize it so it automates and scales. And then also cover over some ongoing improvements throughout the whole session. So it's just, using SOC, NOC, or MSSP services, the impact of segmentation of duties on teams, red team services, and, the importance of staying aware and informed. All of these things are going to get touched on a little bit of time throughout the whole webinar. So if you're not here for the whole thing, you might miss some little golden nuggets of knowledge here and there, but we'll have this recorded. You'll be able to come back to it later. So we're going to start off with vulnerability management lifecycle. So this is something that, knee jerk, okay, this is going to be boring, but it's some important things that need to be gone over for sanity's sake, as well as just, for the benefit of the business operations. So for every element under the sun, there's a remedy or there is none. If there be one, try to find it. If there be none, never mind it. This is a personal credo I've had to take upon myself after running myself into the ground for many years with an MSP. You are certain individuals, we are very driven to, we're going to fix all the things, we're going to control all the things, we're going to make sure everything's right. And it's a Sisyphean task to try and do that. It's actually an impossible task. And you have to be able to put yourself in the mindset that there is a lot of stuff that we can do, a lot of things that we can take care of, but there are certain things that just are going to be out of our purview. We don't have the skill sets, we don't have the tools. It's not. Maybe it's even something that we don't need to concern ourselves with. It's very important at being able to draw those lines and have those lines drawn based on not just the I don't want to bother with it, but more on the what's the business rationale for it? What should we be doing? What should we not be doing? And it's a good sanity check. And if you're going to stay in the MSP business for an extended amount of time or just IT in general, this is a credo that can help you live a much happier life. So, what is a vulnerability? So, we're going to start out with just the textbook definition here, as defined by NIST. So, a weakness in an information system, system security procedures, internal controls, or implementation that could be exploited or triggered by a threat source. That is a broad definition, and that is on purpose because, well, vulnerabilities can exist in almost any system. It can exist in software, firmware, hardware, in human processes, in configurations. There are opportunities for vulnerabilities to exist in every one of those places. So whenever we're talking about vulnerabilities today, don't lock yourself into the perception of, oh, vulnerabilities that exist on a computer because I need to apply a missing patch. Yes, that is part of it. That is not the entirety of it. Because as an MSP, your role is not just risk management associated with missing patches, it is risk management associated with vulnerabilities in the client's environments and in your own. So vulnerabilities will occur. So this is, part of that Sisyphean task. You are never going to have a situation where no vulnerabilities exist in an environment. Vulnerabilities exist in all systems at their point of inception. Somebody just has to find them. And the people that are looking for them and finding them is it's a wide range of actors. There are cyber criminals and cyber gangs that are hunting for vulnerabilities. There are nation states and their sanctioned organizations. There are security researchers. There are bounty hunters that all they do all day, every day is look for vulnerabilities. And if the bounty hunters or the security researchers find it first, then well, we win. If the cyber criminals or nation states find them first, then well, depending on what side of an invisible line on the ground you're on, that might be good or bad. But usually it's not good for the rest of us. So this is back to that whole notion of vulnerabilities exist. You cannot get rid of all of them. All you can do is manage them. And managing them is going to be a big part of what we're discussing today. And for the technicians and the engineers, this is like, okay, yeah, this is common sense stuff. We already knew this. And yeah, maybe you put it in a different context and this makes it easier for me to communicate about it, which is great. For anybody that's in more of a managerial level, we're going to be peeling back a little bit of what actually goes into this. So if your job is to sell this, you're going to be finding out a lot about what it takes to actually deliver this, the bandwidth that's involved, the processes, hopefully, so that you can have a better understanding of what it is going to take for your business to deliver these. So you cannot secure against all unknown vulnerabilities. It is impossible because if you do not know about it, you cannot plan for it. So you must plan in resiliency in your operating procedures, in your workflows, in your infrastructure. So the vulnerability management lifecycle. There are tons and tons and tons of resources on the internet that you can go out and find that go into really deep technical dives or otherwise on vulnerability management lifecycle management. They're worth going out, checking a few, adding it to your knowledge. But whenever you distill them down to like the simplest elements, this is kind of what you wind up with. The vulnerability lifecycle management starts out with, well, first you have to discover it. How do you discover it? That's back to, for us as MSPs, we're probably not the ones that are going to discover certain types of vulnerabilities. So there is a whole class of vulnerabilities that you're never going to be able to discover fresh by yourself. You're just going to be reacting to them what somebody else tells you about it. But then there are others that you can discover. So you can discover a vulnerability in your client's line of workflow because of the line of business software they use. You can figure out that, you know what, one of your steps here is that you're having to have an end user use scan a document, send that document through a web portal, and then, well, what happened to that scanned document? It's still there on the user's computer. Who's managing that? Who's getting rid of that? Is there PII information in there that needs to be controlled? So there are vulnerabilities like that that you can discover. But here it's the discover, prioritize, assess it, report on it, remediate it. Once you've remediated, verifying that it's been remediated, and then starting over again. This is not a do it once thing. This is not a do it once a day thing, not do it once a week or once a month thing. This is something that turns over hundreds or thousands of times a day for an MSP. And the more clients you're supporting, the more infrastructure you're supporting, the more often this is going to turn over. Now, as an MSP, you are leveraging tools and services to help automate this process so it is not a manual process. You are using patch management to facilitate the discovery of missing patches and updates in the system so that you can prioritize them based on severity ratings, get them applied, use reports to make sure that they're being done. There's all kinds of things that you can do to make sure that you're getting, well, getting taken care of. So on to the next slide. So this is like the technical cycle of it, but then there is more of the business. Whenever you analyze this through the business lens of same amount of steps in the cycle, just turns over a little bit differently. New threats emerge. You have to spend the time and the risk associated with those new threats that have emerged. So that cycle for the business side of things, it turns over multiple times a day, just like the technical side of it does. You have to own it. You have to manage it. You have to have processes in place to be able to do this, because if you don't, you're always playing catch up. You're always behind. So we're going to dive in a little bit deeper to the, a little bit of the technical side of the vulnerability management. What did it really mean? And again, this is meant to get you started on this path. There's additional homework and additional research and learning you're going to have to do after this. But the goal here is to get you started in the right direction so you can find your feet faster. So you start out with discovery, and that's all about inventorying all your assets and then identifying vulnerabilities based on regular automated processes. You're already doing part of that with RMM and N-central. Then it moves on to prioritizing. So you're categorizing assets based on their criticality to business operations. Then you're going to have to assess that and create a risk profile based on that asset criticality. So that's all about saying, we have this mission critical line of business solution. Where is it located? What is the infrastructure for it? How important are these individual pieces, and how should we prioritize the support for them? Reporting, so being able to measure and report on risk associated with assets and being able to document plans for dealing with those. Remediation, how, the actual prioritization of the fixing and the execution of it based on that level of risk that you've established earlier. Methods to verify that those threats have been eliminated, and then repeating it. And again, this is something that is a ever turning over cycle. It never stops. So for, again, anybody that's on the managerial side that has never had the benefit of being down in the trenches, this is just one of those clouds that hangs over every engineer, technician, help desk support's head of it never ends. And well, that's just kind of the part of it. And as a business, that's great. You don't want it to ever end. You always want there to be more stuff to be done. But of course, you want to prioritize and make efficiencies where you can. And those efficiencies will benefit the business, but also it benefits the technicians and the engineers that actually have to do the stuff. So going a little bit deeper into discovery. So it's all about finding everything that you can find because, well, if you don't know about it, you cannot protect it. It's not a singular one-time event. All of these that I've got listed can be part of an ongoing discovery process. So you have passive and active software and hardware discovery. If you're using RMM or N-central, some of this is already being done for you because you've got the asset information that is being pulled back into them because of the agents you have deployed. Um, Physical presence, so actually physically inspecting a plant to see what is there. If you're, if you're signing a contract with a client, at some point during that onboarding process and probably even prior to signing the full contract, you're going to have engineers and technicians out on site physically investigating what is there whenever, because, well, you don't want to have a situation where you have desktops with hard drives taped to the tops of chassis with duct tape and you don't know about it. So you're going to be doing physical inspections anyway. So this can be part of it. Whatever is found needs to be recorded that it was physically present, and then you need to cross map that with your other asset collection activities that you're doing. Rogue device discovery, so being able to know and find whenever new devices appear in the environment. N-central is great for this because you have the ability to set up probes for automatic enrollment. For RMM, you have the unmanaged devices view in the network tab that can show you what is in the network that does not have an RMM agent on it. Network, logical, and topology mapping is important to have. Cloud resource mapping, data discovery. So again, if you don't know it's there, you do not know how to, if you don't know it's there, you don't know how to, you don't know to protect it, let alone how to protect it. A question that came in on, tools for scanning for rogue devices. Um, RMM and N-central could be made to do it in the sense that, hey, RMM and N-central will gladly run any PowerShell script that you have, probably with minimal modifications. And somebody somewhere out there in the world has already written a PowerShell script to do something like scan an IP range and tell me what's there. And then you can compare that against a pre-existing list. But that's kind of the, I want to roll up my sleeves and I want to tackle it myself. If you don't want to do that, you can use something like, one of my personal preferences was Nmap. Um, I wrote a lot whenever I was still in the field. I used Nmap a lot, used scripting with it, and one of the things I would do is I would use Nmap, have it as a scheduled task that would run on a recurring schedule from a device, go out and do all types of discovery, get that information, and then send it to me. And then I could compare that to my to my previous reports that I was getting. That's kind of one way of doing it. If I want the cheapest and most efficient way of doing it, though, it is going to be with PowerShell because, well, PowerShell's free and your time to you is usually less expensive than what you would pay for a solution like this. But shortcuts exist. Nmap's a good option. There's some other ones out there. There's also, again, somebody's mentioned there's topology mapping inside of N-central. They're also going to be bringing in the topology mapping inside of RMM eventually. But just on the rogue device detection, a topology map's nice, but how are you going to know a device is a rogue device if it's, well, it's not under management? Okay, that's one mark for it. But also, well, what if something shows up out of the blue, automatically gets added that shouldn't have been added? That's another concern. So that's why asset tracking is so important. Having that knowledge of what's in your environment, what's supposed to be in your environment, and doing quarterly reviews or monthly reviews for those types of things. For prioritizing, so how mission critical is it? So once you've discovered an asset, you really should be categorizing it, for yourself internally, but also according to the business function or group that it belongs to. And this is part of the problem with talking with clients is clients will recognize business risk. They will not recognize a technology risk most times. So you've got to take your technology risk and translate it into a business risk that they can appreciate. And this is part of that process. Assign a business value to the asset group. So now how important is the group this team or this group's functions, how important are they to the overall business? If they're not able to do their work, is that just a minor inconvenience, or is that a full stop on production on everything else? So you have to use that as part of your prioritization. Classify assets that are mission critical to mission operations, and prioritizing the assets that present the most risk if compromised. And that is a significant difference there. There is the classification of an asset based on how much money is it going to cost us if it goes offline. So what's the per hour cost that we're not able to produce? That's part of the business conversation for prioritizing it. But then there is another whole prioritization on it based on, well, it may not be that important of a business function in the sense, well, if this is down, we can still run. But what if it's compromised? What if damage is done to it, malicious or otherwise? What are the knock-on effects for that? And sometimes that can be more damaging than just that service being out. Good example of that is you have a persistent threat actor who is in your environment and they're doing reconnaissance, and say they decided that they wanted to completely knock out your AD and nobody can authenticate. I mean, it's not a good attack, but it's an attack. Well, people can still keep functioning and not even know that that happened for a not insignificant amount of time if you're not monitoring it. Versus they delete backups and drop ransomware. It's just totally different things, and you do have to take those. You have to prioritize whenever you're doing that, and if you can prioritize it on certain things like this, it just makes it easier to have the conversation with clients about why you want to take the steps and why you need to do what you need to do for them. Then assessing those vulnerabilities. So this is not so much about the, oh, we found that there was a missing patch on the system and we need to update it. Patch management is helping you with that. That's making it a trivial, well, for the most part, a trivial process compared to what it would be if you were trying to manually handle it through a bunch of disjointed WSUS servers. But once you discovered an asset, there's some things you need to automate on it. There's the patch management. You need to have vulnerability audits that are going. And again, this is more than just, oh, it's missing patches. It's configuration audits and other audits for things like, are there accounts older than X number of days on this system that need to be locked down or decommissioned? Event-based monitoring, system configuration audits, external pen testing, NOC, SOC, or NOC as a service or SOC as a service stuff. This assessment part is probably where you'll start getting your larger skill gaps of, we don't already have the tools, we don't have the skill or knowledge, where do we go, how do we acquire it? Because if client comes up to you and says, I want you to do pen testing on my environment, if you know how to do that, you're in a top percentile for MSPs. Not many MSPs have the skills or knowledge to be able to do legitimate, honest pen testing. You have to sometimes bring in an external third-party security auditor to do something like that. But not to say that you can't get there. And we'll be going over that a little bit later about, well, what is that, kind of what is that going to look like if we try to. But there is no tarnishing of your honor as an MSP if you say, we do not have these capabilities, we will have to go out to a third party to obtain them. It's just it kind of is a character flaw for a lot of us that find our way to the MSP business model. We pride ourselves on being able to be put in front of a problem, not be told anything useful about it, but still be expected to fix it. And we usually can. It might take us an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. We will bang our head against that brick wall until we have it solved. The problem is that is not a good business methodology. So not suffering from a sense of imposter syndrome, realizing that there's skills and gaps that you're not going to be able to close easily. Let's go get that from someone else. And the pen testing and the NOC and SOC services are a great example of that. And then reporting. So after discoveries need to be brought together so that they can be packaged and put in front of somebody. And again, this is not just about vulnerabilities associated with missing patches. This is for deeper things. Information gathered from multiple sources need to be compiled together as actionable data. So you run a open port scan in an environment. Great, but then you've got to also take and run a your report for missing patches, and then you got to run another report for something else. You still have to be able to bring that together, put it in a centralized location, put it in front of the client so that you can get them on board with the actions. And having the business risk of the vulnerability, and again, that's back to having that conversation in on terms that they will understand, and then also the remediation timeline based on the risk assessment of the impact from that vulnerability. So a good example of this is you have a client that has a line of business software. They are using it as mission critical, but it's a little old and it still uses QuickTime to display documents. QuickTime is a hard no in modern environments. There is absolutely no reason why it should be allowed to still be existing in an environment that is connected to the internet. So that would be a vulnerability. You would discover that at some point during your discovery process and your assessment process. Then you have to go back and take that to the client and put it in front of them in a report in some type of form that lets them know, hey, we did discovery, we did assessments, we found out you're using this plug-in in this mission critical piece of software that cannot be patched, cannot be updated, and everybody in the world that has any semblance of knowledge around security says this is a giant no-no and it should not exist. We need to plan to sunset this solution so we can replace it for something that does not rely on this plugin that has these major sets of vulnerabilities with them. Is that a pleasant conversation to have? It's not sometimes, because you're going to have clients that say, well, we can't afford to, or we really don't think it's that big of a deal. That's why it is really important to have all of these things lined up as a report, clearly defined before you go and talk to them. Because if you just call somebody up and tell them, hey, you've got QuickTime on your computers and it's not good, it needs to be gotten rid of. Some MSPs have the type of relationships with their clients that is all it takes, but not everybody has that luxury. So it is something that you should approach. Good question. So can we search for installed items like QuickTime from the console? The answer is yes, you can do that for RMM and N-central. For RMM, it's underneath the asset information, the asset tracking window. Or if you want to get a little, I don't want to say fancy, but if you want to massage data a little bit more, you can go to asset tracking, reports, XML data dump, pull all of that information out, process it through your choice of Excel or something else so you can present it in something that's a little bit prettier. But yes, short answer is yes. You can look for vulnerable software or software that, right, I don't want it to exist in my environment. You can even take a step further, and this is something I'll be talking about in some further, maybe some boot camps, but definitely some blog posts in the future about canaries in the coal mine. What can you do to monitor for canary events in your clients' environments that are indicators of, customer churn? Because there are all types of things that can happen in a client's environment that can be detected prior to a client calling you and saying, you know what, things aren't working out and we need to close out, we need to exit our agreement. So, things like monitoring for other remote access tools. You can do that with RMM and N-central in an automated fashion. So if you ever see, you're using Take Control. So if you ever see AnyDesk or TeamViewer, or you see another remote management solution get installed on an endpoint, you immediately know about it and you can call and respond to it as a security incident. And if you're able to do that and reach out to the client immediately and tell them, hey, we have a security incident, we need to verify what's happening on your end, that escalation, that quickly escalates it to, oh, you knew about that? How did you know about that? You're monitoring for that kind of stuff? Yes, we are, because that is part of our duty to make sure that something like this tool does not wind up on your environment in an uncontrolled fashion that can control damage that we can't prevent. Then verify, so ensuring success of remediation. So once you've went through all of this trouble, you still need to be able to verify it. So you need to be able to ensure that remediations were put in place, that patches were applied, that the remediations actually took, verify that it was all affected assets have the remediation applied, and verifying through support tickets that all the record all the actions and close them out. And I am a big giant proponent of, it does not happen if there is not a ticket. Not that if there's not a ticket, it didn't happen, but if there is not a ticket, it does not happen. So getting everything recorded, even if it's not billable, is very important because it shows a record of events in your due diligence. But also it helps you have just, honestly, just a CYA. And this will also be part of my segmentation discussion that's a little bit later. Now, the verification process should not be done by the same person that's on the execution side of it. Somebody needs to look over someone else's shoulder to verify something was done the way it was supposed to be. It's not about trust, it's about verification. And of course, some environments, some MSPs, you do not have the resources for this. Perfectly understandable, but it's something you should be aware of and plan for as you grow. But whenever you work through all of these things, so once you get through that whole vulnerability life cycle and you do everything you're supposed to be doing, well, you have to start it over again. It's a never ending process. You're always going to be pushing that rock up the hill. All right. So, but of course, the first time around, you can take shortcuts. If you're just starting this out today, there are still some things that you can do today and tomorrow while you plan to do all the other stuff. And some of those things will just let you short circuit and get right to whatever you need to do. Because even if you went through the trouble of doing an honest to goodness full risk assessment of a client with penetration testing and every bell and whistle you can think of, you can have 50 clients do it on all 50 clients. There will still be some common things that you'll find out you need to do for everybody. And that's kind of what this is about, is, the the whole management life cycle is important and you do need to establish it, but there are some baseline best practices you can start out with. And if you want a much deeper dive on what that should be, how you're supposed to build packages around that, how you're supposed to market it, then look out for the building to a cybersecurity framework boot camp that we'll be doing in, I believe it's going to be in September. So just some recommendations here of, this is stuff you're going to probably have to do with every client. So you might as well just make it a baseline. Patch management for critical patches being applied within 15 days. That's the upper limit of that. I know plenty of MSPs and internal IT departments that critical patches are applied within 3 days or 5 days. They cut it really low down. They cut it really close there. And then there's also something I don't have in here, but if you've ever been to the security office hours, something I always recommend is do not patch solely on criticality of the patch. So whenever you look at patch management, Microsoft and us, we all use Microsoft's metadata that says this is how severe this patch is: critical, important, low. And we just take Microsoft at their word and make that available in the platforms. But there is a temporal severity metric that's not there, that is based on the underlying vulnerability of how likely is this vulnerability to actually be exploited. And that sometimes is more important because, well, if you have a critical severity patch and that's all you know is it's critical severity, well, you're going to go ahead and apply it because, well, it's critical. But you have a important patch, you might hold off on it. But that critical vulnerability that underlines the first one, may be marked as exploitation less likely because of, even though it can cause a lot of damage if somebody uses it, the likelihood that someone will use it is very low versus that important patch that's marked as important. Well, the underlying vulnerability that's associated with it might actually be listed as actively exploited. It's under active exploitation. There are attackers out there taking advantage of this vulnerability and causing damage. And in that case, you should be applying that important patch before you apply that critical patch most times. And that's something that I go over in the office hours security, the security office hours. So if you don't attend those, I recommend get to at least one of them so you can see what it's about. Um, but one of the things I do is I go through the trouble of taking all of the metadata and everything that Microsoft announces on Patch Tuesday and just quickly work through and process it so I can give you a list of prioritization of based on the severity level of it, as well as based on the temporal severity of how likely it is to actually be exploited. And this is, it's kind of a shortcoming of a shift in the way patches traditionally been done, and everybody is catching up with it. Just about any remote management platform of any type out there are still working on the severity rating. And we have to rely on Microsoft to give us that metadata in the patch. And if Microsoft does not give us that metadata in the patch, well, we just mark it as other. So it'll show up as a little dash without anything else. And the unfortunate thing is, well, we're beholding to Microsoft to tell us what it is. And whenever they do not tell us what it is, well, it can throw a wrench in a lot of people's workflows. Yeah, and unknown equals other, and that just means Microsoft did not tell us. So, and whenever that happens, again, if you hit my security office hours, we'll try to point that out for you so you're not, missing out on stuff like that. Enabling MFA for all platforms where available. That's like a baseline non-negotiable thing. Identity management is the new frontier, and you need to be able to make sure MFA is everywhere that you can get it. Disabling RDP and blocking it at the perimeter. If you're using take control and you're using, well, if you're using N-Central or RMM and you have take control available, well, that's what you're probably primarily using to access systems. So if that's what you're primarily using to access systems, why keep RDP available in environments, especially on workstations or endpoints that don't need to ever be RDP'd into? Uh, that is a lateral movement vector. If one system is behind on patches and somebody compromises another system, or somebody brings in an outside device that's already compromised, well, RDP is left on that device, still has the old vulnerabilities that can be exploited by something like Eternal Blue. There you go. And you could have blocked it just by turning off the RDP service or blocking it with the internal firewall. So there are reasons why you would have RDP in environment, but on the majority of those situations, you're better served to get rid of it. Switch personal devices to isolated guest networks. Now, I never gave any of my clients as an MSP, I never gave them the passphrase for their production wireless environments. If anything was going to get added to that, I was adding it myself. Plus, we weren't using DHCP, and we had a radius server set up to a bunch of other stuff, but we just did not even entertain the notion. If you have your own device and you bring it in, it is going on this segmented, separate VLAN or physical network, because we don't control those devices. We have no idea where they've been, where they're coming from, where they're going. We're not going to allow them to touch production. Start using a password manager to encourage complex and unique passwords. One of the cardinal sins is password reuse. And the easier you make it for end users and technicians to not have to remember passwords, the less likely they are to reuse passwords. So having a password manager is becoming almost a necessity at this point. We have Passportal, ourselves, there are plenty of other options out there that can give you that type of functionality. Um, just a bonus with Passportal is we give you a brandable password manager that you can resell to end users. And it is a, actually, just let me pull it up here. There's a browser extension for it. There is a web portal for it. There's a mobile app for it, but it's available, easy to access, and there's a tertiary identification token with it. So if I try to log into this, not only do I have to know my email, my password, and organization key, I also have to get past an MFA. So there's a lot protecting this from here, and this organization key is also, something that cannot be reset. So somebody cannot say, oh, I need to reset my password. Okay, cool. You cannot reset the organization password key. You cannot request it to be sent to you. So it is a hard lock on being able to access whatever you put inside of Passport. So you can treat it as a zero knowledge repository of credentials and documentation. Whatever you put in there, we don't know about it. We can't access it because that organization key is also your encryption key for the data. The switch from AV to an endpoint protection platform. It does not matter what endpoint protection platform you switch over to, but you should probably discontinue use of standard AVs in most client environments that you support as an MSP. There are smaller clients where it is going to be fine to use just a standard AV, but a majority of the clients the MSPs support probably need to receive the protection that an endpoint protection platform can afford them. So yeah, standard AV is going to be anything of the classical sort. Like, we have AV Defender and we have managed AV. Managed AV inside of RMM, AV Defender inside of N-Central. They are both Bitdefender. They are SDK implementations of Bitdefender's Gravity Zone engine. It is a perfectly fine and good and great antivirus solution, but the further we move into the future and the more advanced the threats get, well, we saw the writing on the wall. That is why we went out and negotiated the relationship with SentinelOne that we did so that we could bring EDR into our platforms. Automate getting backups offsite. This is a challenge for MSPs for all kinds of reasons: cost, bandwidth, client perceptions. There's all kinds of reasons why it is a challenge. Back whenever I started out in just freelance PC repair, not even in the MSP business yet, it was not uncommon to have somebody say, all right, we're going to set up this server, we're going to put this external USB drive on it, we're going to use Windows backup. It's going to back up a full image of the system every Saturday night, and Monday morning, you, Mr. Employee of the client, it is your responsibility to swap this for another drive and take that one home with you. You have now introduced a human element of error into the situation that you cannot reliably manage. Are you going to call that person every Monday and make sure they remember to take it home? Are they going to do that? Are they going to be honest whenever they actually forget and they say, oh, no, yeah, sure, I got it? You cannot rely on it. That's why automation of getting backups offsite is so important. There are plenty of ways of doing that, but if you're operating within our portfolio of options, it's the default action for Enable's backup solution. You can tell it to also keep a copy of that data locally for you on a network share or something, but its first goal is to get everything offsite in an encrypted, immutable fashion, so that once that backup hits the cloud, it does not matter what happens to that endpoint, what a malicious actor does. They can access that system, cause all time of damage. They can uninstall backup. They can destroy the backups you have kept locally. They are not going to be able to touch what is already backed up in the cloud. And that is the more important part of any backup solution, is that once it goes off site, it cannot be tampered with from the origin source. All right, so security frameworks. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about those. And well, what is a security framework? when we're going to go with the loosest definition you can come up with here. A security framework is just a collection of standards, guidelines, and best practices for managing security risks. There are, you've got the NIST cybersecurity framework, you have high trust, you have the CIS controls, you have the ISO 27000 series. You can even roll your own security framework if you want to go through the time of mapping requirements and standards against compliances and everything. You can make your own. But you're probably, if this is the your starting point and you're trying to find your feet, it is going to be almost impossible to achieve if it's your first time around. Go grab an existing established framework and work from it. So frameworks versus standards, because this is a definition problem that a lot of people have whenever they start talking about these things. What's the difference between a framework and a standard, and compliance and certification? So a framework is just a collection of recommendations, what you should protect, not necessarily how you should protect it, versus a standard, which is usually more well defined. It'll give you a minimum of what you should be doing. It still may not dictate the specifics of the execution of it, though. So you still might have to kind of figure out yourself how you're going to achieve that particular standard control. Good examples of some standards are the NIST 800-171 or 800-553, PCI DSS, the security rules out of FINRA. Those are things that are usually more well defined, and you can treat it as a checklist of things that you should go do. And then, again, you already have a framework. So the collection of what you already do, your services, your security stance, your processes and your procedures and your SOPs, and all of that is part of your existing security framework. Of course, there's always an opportunity to improve everything. So the question is, well, how much do we need to improve it? Building a robust framework from scratch, again, it is doable, but it is not where you should be starting out from if this is your first time. Choose a framework based on your supported verticals. There is no reason whatsoever for you to go and pursue NIST cybersecurity framework if all you're doing is supporting small mom and pop retail and offices. There's, you can do it. You might be, over engineering the situation, but it's probably not the most efficient way to approach it. So that goes into choosing a framework based on your supported verticals. If all you are supporting are small mom and pop operations and small retail offices of that nature, then you're probably going to be better served using the CIS controls. You can meet, another benefit of using frameworks though is you can meet multiple standards by following the same framework. So if you go and use the CIS standard, the CIS controls, and you implement everything according to a specific group, well, that would probably make you compliant with PCI DSS, probably also make you compliant with HIPAA security rules and others. So that is one of the bigger benefits of a framework. It lets you achieve compliance with multiple standards by following just one set of one playbook. And this helps you standardize the technical operations and the processes across the board. And anytime you can do that, you're making yourself more efficient, you're saving labor, you're saving sanity. And the boot camp that I mentioned earlier, the Building to a Cybersecurity Framework boot camp that we're going to be doing in September, is all about this, is choosing a standard, choosing a framework, how you choose it, how you build to it, getting you started on it, as well as the business side of that conversation. So it's going to be a 50-50 split between the technical and the business side. So if you are finding that you are having problems breaking into security services, or you have a problem where your clients still perceive what you do and what you offer as just the people that fix the computers when they break, the Building to a Cybersecurity Framework and everything we're going to be going over there is going to be probably a paradigm shift for what you're doing. So I highly encourage anybody that is in that situation to attend, because we're going to be doing everything from the technical framework implementation to how you build packages around that, and even the starting on how you market that, so that you can change your offerings and what you do from that perception of you just fix computers to no, we offer cybersecurity services. So what we're going to be going over next is system hardening. A lot of this is going to be applicable for RMM or N-central. Um, so there's not much that we'll be covering today that there's not going to be a way that if you can do it with us, you're going to be able to do it with RMM or N-central. So if I'm covering something that you're like, okay, I have no clue how I even do that in my respective platform, then let me know. I'll try to point out some additional resources that we have available to get you started with it. And again, for anybody that came in and joined us a little bit late, I have in the go-to webinar, there is a handout section that has a security bootcamp extra resources PDF that has a bunch of additional links to some resources in there. It's the same one that I gave out yesterday. So if you already have it, no need to get this one. But if you don't have it, again, there's some really useful resource links in there, such as just some internal resource links for Enable. So if you're interested in future boot camps, there's a link right there to go see all of our boot camps we're offering, our office hours, who our head nerds are, so you can potentially reach out to one of us, since we are considered subject matter experts in whatever we're covering. But also the automation cookbook link is in here as well, which is important. You're going to kind of see how important that is in a few minutes. And then there's also a bunch of resources for a bunch of other things that we may be talking about today. So system hardening. What is system hardening? So we're going to stick with as generalized a description as we can for most of this stuff, but it's the process of securing a system by reducing its attack surface. When you distill down everything that you're going to do that could be possibly referred to as system hardening, this is what it is. So what can be system hardened? So it's more than just endpoints. Just like vulnerabilities can exist anywhere, that means you can harden anything that anywhere where vulnerabilities may exist. So software, firmware, hardware, people, your processes, configurations, these are all things that have the opportunity for you to reduce the attack surface associated with them and therefore harden it. And this is where a lot of MSPs miss out on an opportunity, because this takes more effort, it takes more resources, it takes a different set of skills and knowledge than just the traditional I can fix a computer that a lot of break fix to MSPs start out with. So if you're past that point, great. But if you're still struggling on that point and you're trying to find your way out, these are some of the things that you can be doing to add to your services portfolio, so you can increase margins, bill for more things, find more work. So what goes into hardening? So if we're talking about hardening software, what do we mean? Well, we're talking about credential and encryption and obfuscation, automatically applying updates for software, migrating from unsupported to supported software, and removing non-essential software. These are all things that you can do to harden and make a client's environment more resilient. In credential encryption and obfuscation, whenever we're talking about RMM and N-central, you can add customized tasks and customized checks and service monitors to RMM and N-central that require credentials to be passed back and forth. And if you just throw a PowerShell script in there with those in plain text, well, they're just going to wind up in plain text on all your endpoints that script runs on. That is not good. So you can use the automation manager that's available for RMM and N-central to do that password encryption and obfuscation for you, so that you can make that process more secure. Automatically applying updates. You're already dealing with this with patch management and your third-party patching you're doing. Migrating from unsupported to supported software. That goes back to discovery and assessments, that vulnerability assessment vulnerability life cycle. You don't know what you need to protect until you know it's there. And once you know it's there, then you have to assess it. And once you assess it, you will find out whether it is still supported by the vendor or not. And if it's not, then you need to create your report how you're going to upgrade it, how you're going to replace it, what that's going to look like, what that's going to cost, and you put that proposal in front of a client. And then they either accept it and say, yes, we will follow your professional recommendations on what you should do about this, or they're going to say, no, we can't afford it, or some other reason why they don't want to proceed with it. That's fine. You've told them about it. Time to pull out the risk acceptance letter and say, we told you about this. You've decided that you don't want to do anything about it. So you're accepting the risk. Sign here and tell us not to do it. That way you got it in signing that we warned you, you didn't want to do it. Not our problem anymore. Is that the best way of managing a relationship? Not necessarily, but if you're getting to that point with a client, it is better to have a CYA in place. Yep, and that's another good recommendation that came in from somebody is with the hardening software is disabling insecure protocols and ciphers. So I'm going to apply that to something that hopefully a lot of people in here have knowledge and experience with. Well, if you have some older systems out there for multiple different reasons, you still might have SMB version 1 enabled and running environments because of a line of business application or something else. SMB v1 should be a giant hard no for everybody in all environments. So that would be something that you would want to disable, and not only disable whenever you find it, you also need to be able to monitor for it so you know whenever it does pop up so you can go shut it off. And that's back into a RMM or in central capability that is not an out of the box check or service monitor, but it is something you can add. Firmware, so BIOS updates, router and firewall firmware updates, making sure that you've turned on or off virtualization for endpoints if they're not supposed to be able to run VMs. Most workstations do not need to have virtualization enabled. And if you turn it off, well, you've shut off an attack path for some forms of malware and ransomware that leverage VM technology. Hardware side of things, well, we're talking about physical access controls, making sure that you have physical locks on server rooms and telco rooms and having auditable access for those areas, maybe even having security cameras set up. Case locks, Kensington locks, those types of physical protection methods, intrusion detection alarms, even something simple like monitor privacy screens. If you're working in medical, that's almost a given that everybody, everywhere in the environment, every lost monitor should have monitor privacy screens on it. But if you got CPAs, lawyers, and you can even entertain the thought with them as well. But I lay out some of these things because I want to push back against the misconception that a lot of people have that security is all in the software. It's not all in the software. There is a lot you can do for security that is about the software, but there is a lot more about security that has nothing to do with the software that you as the MSP still should be tackling. You should be taking ownership of it, own the risk associated with it. And if you own that risk, you can monetize that risk. Then people, well, what do you do to harden people? Cybersecurity awareness training. Force non-admin account use for all non-admin purposes. You can, if you really feel so inclined, you can create your own cybersecurity or cyber hygiene awareness training that you wanted. There are plenty of ways to make that happen. But you can also just go ahead and buy it prepackaged for somewhere else like KnowBe4, Barracuda, or someone else. And the time to market and the time you spend trying to do it yourself versus just buying that prepackaged solution, business wise, it's probably going to make a lot more sense to just buy that prepaid solution. Not that you shouldn't explore creating your own and maybe using it down the road, but getting started, you're probably going to need to use somebody else's. And the non-admin account use on all non-admin purposes, I always relate this back to the real world of you have clients that have business owners or presidents that say, I need to have access to everything. I need the admin account on everything. It's non-negotiable, blah, blah, blah. And if you are a smaller MSP or you are a one-man operation, part of that makes sense of, oh, you know what, if anything happens to me, yeah, you still need to be able to get in your systems. You still need to be able to access your stuff so you can continue to operate. We need some type of I get hit by a bus insurance. But that's not the best way of putting that insurance in place, giving them that admin access. There's no reason why a business owner who is not also the core IT person should have enterprise admin rights on a domain. So, well, multiple reasons why, not one of least is they are a giant target for attackers. The better solution there is to set up a escrow account. There are a lot of solutions out there that offer escrow services where you and your client are going to be named on the escrow account. You'll both have your own logins. And if something was ever to happen to you, whether you went out of business, you were injured, whatever, your client can reach out to that escrow service, sign in, say, yes, this is an emergency and I need access to all of my information. And whatever you put in there and made available for them, they can retrieve and start leveraging. Now, of course, the whole condition of that relationship is that once you take that step and you retrieve that information, you're waiving certain liabilities associated with our agreement. You're saying, no, you're taking on that responsibility. It's now your problem, not mine anymore. So if anything goes wrong, you know, you're the one who did it, not me. And those types of escrow accounts, they do cost a little bit to set them up, but it is a peace of mind that you cannot replace any other way whenever you are a smaller operation. Process, so segmentation of duties, that's going to be a big thing, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Business continuity plans are part of hardening. So, the business itself, your client's business needs to be hardened. You are there as the MSP. You may be taking on the role of virtual CIO for them. So you need to not just say, not just give your opinion on the technical side, but how their business can improve based on what you can do for them. Incident response plans. This is something a lot of MSPs fall short on. They do not have documented incident response plans and processes set up. So if you can create those, again, it's all about your further hardening an environment. External audits. You can't know anything. You can't know everything about all things all the time. And sometimes you need a second set of eyes to look over things. That's why external audits of not only your client's environments, but also of your own environments and your internal processes are important. This isn't something that I'm going to say you should be doing every quarter or every month, but it is something that needs to be done with some frequency. And then also dry and wet runs of processes, so verifying that everything's good in place and everything works the way you expect it to. Question that came in, driver stop. So a tangent question about N-Central and driver pushes. So I'm going to, instead of just talking about drivers, well, RMM and N-Central have the capability of running almost anything on an endpoint that you decide you want to have run on that endpoint, because, well, we have the presence there. It's as system, you have full control over that system, you can do whatever you want. So if you want to install a piece of software on a computer, you can use RMM or N-Central to facilitate that. You can use RMM or N-Central to also do driver installations. If the vendor for that driver has created that driver in such a way that there is a solid install process for it, or if it's simply you just have to replace a driver in a location and restart the service, yes, you can do that with RMM or N-Central. It's not that much difference of a process than it is with anything else whenever you start getting into custom service monitors and custom tasks in the platform. So yes, it is doable. If you don't know where to even get started with it, then the automation boot camps will probably be a good next step for you. Configuration. So, implicit deny on all unneeded ports in a firewall. That could be just a baseline thing. You don't need to use it. It's not going to be open. Implementing privileged user controls, disabling non-essential services, account lockouts, forcing password history, limitations, disabling external drive mounting, event monitoring, and these are all kinds of things that you may already be, configuration monitoring stuff you're already doing through RMM or Essential. Again, there's always room for improvements in everything, and you can add more to it. But like the disable external drive monitoring, well, why is that a configuration thing? Well, you need to be able to configure your environments so that it does not happen in the first place, but you also need a way to monitor for it if it does happen. So that's why having, if you wanted to, you could use Automation Manager or PowerShell or group policy through domain and Active Directory or Intune. And whatever way you decided to do it, you could say, all right, we're going to prevent external media from being mounted on the system. You can also use EDR that's integrated inside of RMM or N-Central or the standalone version. It has a device control feature that lets you set up rules that say things like, all right, we're going to disable and prevent any external media from being mounted on this system, but we're not going to block any USB mice or keyboards, and we're going to allow specific pre-approved external drives that we know have been encrypted, and we're monitoring for them to be encrypted. We'll allow those, and that's it. And you can set up those types of more advanced scenarios in your environments. And well, when you get into the marketing side of it, you can go into, well, you've got to be able to restrict access anyway. So let's make it even more secure. Here, buy this box of encrypted USB keys that I bought for 50 bucks that I'm going to sell you for $500. So all sounds great. Everything that I've been through so far, most everybody's going to be like, yep, you should be doing that, no problem. But where are you supposed to start with it? So a good place to start with these things is choosing a framework and building from there. One of the questions that I get from almost all new MSPs, what am I supposed to monitor for? What is important? And the short, unfortunate answer there is we cannot tell you what is important to monitor in your client's environment. You have to go and you have to figure that out. That comes with skill and experience and a bunch of other things, but there is a way to start that process on a good foot. And a security framework is a good way to start that. Frameworks, they should complement your client verticals. They need to be reasonable for you to achieve. If you're a single man shop, you do not need to go out, grab the NIST cybersecurity framework and decide that you're going to implement everything that's in there concerning 800.171. You will run yourself ragged into the ground and quickly be a disillusioned with everything you're trying to do. Design service packages that fit that framework. So after you go through the trouble of following a framework and can I monitor this? Can I do this? Do I have this capability? Yes, yes, yes. And then you turn around and turn that into a portfolio of services that you're going to turn around and offer. Gives you the ability to close the gaps on a lot of things you otherwise wouldn't have been aware were gaps. And this can help you standardize and repeat, of course, because if you go through the trouble of doing it and you set it as a baseline that this is going to happen with everybody regardless, then it makes it easier to scale it, less stress, better margins. So frameworks to consider. I do talk rough about the NIST cybersecurity frameworks, and that is just because if you are starting out, it will make you very frustrated to try and deal with the NIST cybersecurity framework because the language is a little esoteric sometimes in it, but also the NIST cybersecurity framework itself does not have any guidelines in it. It points you to other standards and other things that you should implement. So you get the NIST cybersecurity framework and start reading through it, you're going to have to go start opening up tab after tab after tab after tab to go find that other control that's mentioned in another standard from another organization. But if that's your target client base, then well, you have to take it on the chin and get through it. But there are 5 core functions in this cybersecurity framework. It's about the ability to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover from incidents. There's 4 different tiers of implementation based on complexity and sensitivity of data, and it can help you with gap discovery where you're coming up short. But again, It is a deep dive. It is not for the weak-willed. If this is your first time through, again, do yourself a favor, don't start with it. The CIS controls, though, they are easier to digest. And I always recommend starting there if you've never done this before, because you can literally read through all of the CIS controls in an afternoon and make sense of every last one of them. You could probably even read through them all in an hour. There's actually, it's not 20 controls now. They just updated it to CIS version 8, which has 18 controls and multiple subcontrols. And they're all easily readable and they make sense and you can understand what they're talking about. It's built on the principle of least effort for best returns. So as you're starting out in the beginning of all of the controls, if you're at, group, control one, subcontrol one, it's like the easiest thing you can do that gives you the best returns on your investment for doing it. They have it broken down into 3 implementation groups based on complexity of the environments and the sensitivity of the data. So you have implementation group 1, which is small retail offices and small operations that don't have a lot of sensitive data on site. There's not a lot for them to have to protect. Then you have implementation group 2, which is going to be more like small medical offices, lawyers, CPAs. There's a little bit more regulation on their data. They have to be a little bit more careful about things. And then you have implementation group 3, which is supposed to be for enterprise, larger organizations, large medical offices, financial institutions, things of that nature. So as an MSP, you already know who your clients are, who you're servicing. So you can easily choose which one of those implementation groups you should go focus on. And you just go through the list and you see, well, what does it say I should do for this implementation group? And just check it off the list of, yes, I can do this. And when you find something that you say, well, nope, I can't do this, either I don't know how to or I don't have the tool to do it, well, you've discovered a gap that you need to fill. It leaves little room to miss something because of that. And it's great for building scalable, repeatable security packages, because after you go through the trouble of doing it and you adhere to one of those implementation groups, because that matches your client base, then you can redo all of these things for all of your clients without having to change much about what you're doing from client to client. So we're going to drop into a short demo for automating some endpoint hardening and some monitoring with RMM and Essential. I'm also going to point you to some additional resources and some tools that, if you've not been exposed to them before, hopefully we're giving you a jump start on a bunch of things. So first, I want to go into just what have we already made available for you? So we have out on the success.n-able website, we have the automation cookbook. And if you've never been to or seen the automation cookbook before, it is under resources, automation cookbooks. And what this is a repository of checks, service monitors, tasks, and scripts that other partners have created and have graciously uploaded them here, or where we have, the sales engineer team or the partner success engineers have worked with a partner that needed a particular challenge to overcome, and we helped them, get whatever it was they needed to have done, and we put it back up here so everybody else can benefit for that. Now, of course, these are all scripts that were normally built for specific scenarios. So they may not work 100% across the board for everybody without a little bit of tweaking, but most of the time, they're all either PowerShell scripts or automation manager scripts, and they're easy to edit and modify. And the little bit of the time and the effort you put into being able to do that significantly expands your capabilities. Just as what are some important ones in here that I may want to go check out and use in your environment? So one is, let's talk about logins. So RMM and Essential have default capabilities in them to have an alert or service monitor that says, hey, somebody has failed to log into this system X number of times in the past 24 hours, just letting you know. And that's great for, brute force attacks or things of that nature. It can also give you a heads up that, there's misconfigurations in the environment and a service account is still holding on to some bad cached credentials or something. But that's useful for just repeated failed login checks. But an attacker is not only going to be using brute force to try and log into systems. They probably have already done some type of reconnaissance. They have even perhaps gone off and bought a set of compromised credentials off of a dark web portal. It is relatively expensive to go out and buy a valid set of RDP or credentials, admin credentials for a domain on the dark web. I can spend $7 and I can have somebody's admin enterprise credentials. So you need to be able to know whenever somebody is using those credentials in an unusual way. So how do you detect that? Well, one of the ways you're probably going to do that is, well, you're probably going to have network security appliances or perimeter defenses that say nobody can log in via the RDP protocol from any IP addresses except for this pre-approved list. But not all clients have that capability. They don't have the resources or the budget for that type of equipment. You have smaller operations. You can't really do that. So, well, what else can we do? So with RMM and N-central, we have some user login checks in here that are time bound. So what they're doing is it's a check that just says, let me look at the last X number of login attempts that were made and see if any of those logins are happening outside of a predefined window. So people logging in at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that's perfectly fine in the client's environment. But if somebody logs in at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning in a facility that's all the doors are locked and all the lights are off at that time, that's a red flag. So being able to monitor for that type of unusual login activity is important. That's part of the larger identity management conversation, and there are all types of ways to use what Microsoft has made available and some other solutions to manage this in other ways. But if you already have RMM or N-central and you want to just have this additional alerting available, here it is and available for you. Another one is, well, let's go to, I believe it's patch management. This is another one for hardening. So part of your hardening process around vulnerability management on software is making sure that patches are being installed, and anything and everything you can do to make that a smoother process benefits you. So I have in here one that I actually added a little while ago is this pre-patch prompt and staging. So best practice is typically to say to a client, we are going to perform our general maintenance on this day at this time every week, and we're going to perform patching during this window on Friday afternoons from 7 to 9 o'clock. Just whatever kind of works for that client's environment. You define that patch window, you set it up, it's automatically going to happen. Everybody should know it should happen at that time, so nobody has any real right to complain that, well, I closed my laptop before I left on Friday, it didn't do any patch updates, it's Monday morning, I opened it, I need to work, but it's trying to do patches. Well, you did not follow standard operating procedure as established by your company and your employee manual, not my problem. But you still need to be able to improve your success rate for it. So this pre-patch prompt and staging is all about that. And I'm actually going to bring up the automation manager, since that's what I use to build it, so we can get a little bit of actual face time for the automation manager, so we can get some exposure for it. The automation manager, if you've never used it before, is a GUI based script builder. It is a drag and drop script builder that can help you overcome the initial challenges with, well, I don't know how to write PowerShell scripts, or I don't have these technicians or the bandwidth available to write custom scripts or monitoring. That is a hurdle that you have to get over somehow, some way, at some point. And the automation manager can help facilitate that, since it gives us, again, a nice GUI-based script builder to do these types of things. So I am going to open a automation manager script I've already done. And the way this works is, so I just went off and said, all right, this is an old habit, something I picked up whenever, was supporting a lot of Windows 7 systems. I always cleared out the software distribution download folder to help improve my success rates for patches, because if Windows grabbed a update file that was out of date, or it was corrupted in some way, or something was wrong with it, then just by clearing it out all the time prior to patch windows, less likely to have an issue. So I've got two blocks here. The first one is just deleting whatever is in the download folder, and then I've got a give me a list of the folders in this location, and then also delete any folders that are in there. And that's just, a recursive delete, so everything's cleared out. And then I throw up a reboot prompt, and this reboot prompt is brandable, and the branding for it is up here underneath this. So you have to, if you go out to the automation manager and you download this pre-patch prompt and staging script, it's right here in big capital letters. It's going to carry default branding, and you have to change it. Otherwise, whenever you run this, it's just going to show up with a it's going to show up with the Head Nerd logo. I think there's even some floating out around there where it's got a turkey in it because somebody made one that was seasonally appropriate. But if you want to change that branding, all you have to do is just up here underneath options, branding, and upload whatever your image is and change your color scheming. Oh yeah, I think I just somebody just had an eureka moment in the chat. But yes, the software distribution folder can safely be cleared before patch windows, because all you're doing there is getting rid of any previous patch files that system has downloaded and forcing it to go grab brand new fresh ones. Now, if you're in large environments and bandwidth is a concern, you have to weigh that a little bit. But in most smaller environments, nobody's ever going to notice the performance or the bandwidth hit, and it just helps. And we're just playing the statistics game here of, we're less likely to have an issue. So here again with this one, it's just clearing out what's there, and that's this software distribution download folder. I've got the reboot prompt. I can customize the message that is going to pop up, so I can be very clear and concise with this. Depending on what your personal philosophies are, you might decide that you're going to do a generic pop-up for everybody across the board. But you can also say, well, all right, now I'm going to put a little bit more polish on this. And what you could do is you could just come in here and say, well, I'm just going to customize it and have a different policy for each client, and it'll have their name in it. Or you can go even deeper and you say, well, I'm going to prepare a different one for each client, and I'm going to have it have that client's branding there. So there's all different types of ways that you can do this to kind of change the look and the feel of it, which when you're on the technical side of execution, it seems like extra work for no benefit. Why am I going to go through the trouble of doing this? The end user is still going to get the warning. This is still going to be happening. Why do I care what it looks like? But on the business side of the conversation, it is very important. Every bit of polish that you can put on the delivery of your services is further justifications for the margins that you charge. And it also helps feed into the client perception of you. One of the biggest challenges for MSPs, especially when you're early in your journey, is how do I get the perception of my clients that I am just the person that fixes the computers and takes care of their help desk tickets? How do I get past that perception? This is one of those small things that can help with it. Make sure that any communications and anything that you put in front of that client is polished. As another example of, what can you do with the automation manager while I have it up at the moment, because I want you to be interested in automation manager, in going out and finding PowerShell scripts that can do the thing that you want them to do, and then adding them back into RMM and then Central, because that is the secret sauce for every management platform out there. No matter what you're using, no single platform is going to have all capabilities for everything that you need to do. And you've got choices. You can either, well, go buy something that can do that for you from somewhere else, or you can roll up your sleeves and make it yourself. And the more you can roll up your sleeves and do it yourself natively within a platform, the better off you are. Does that take effort? Does it take skills? Does it take additional knowledge? Yes, it does. But to evolve as an MSP with as much efficiency as you can get, it is one of the things you have to be able to do. So as to feed further into that, I'm going to pull up another automation manager that we've written as an indicator of compromise. So um, one of the things that, again, back to well, what am I supposed to monitor? What am I supposed to be looking for in my environments? Nobody can tell you that but you whenever you go in and assess your environment. But again, part of that, what you're feeding into is, well, what do I need to monitor? And if you're going to say that, well, I need to be able to monitor for security events and indicators of compromise that would let me know that something is going wrong in my environment, you can do that as a manual process. I have a PowerShell script here that's embedded inside of Automation Manager, and it is really simple. All it is doing is saying, hey, look and see if you can find a scheduled task with this name. So if I go add this to N-Central as a service monitor, or I go add it to RMM as a check, whenever I add it, it's going to ask me what that name for that scheduled task is. So if you're reading a security article one afternoon and you see this particularly nasty piece of ransomware that's making the rounds, that part of its execution is to put persistence in place through a scheduled task. Well, you can look for that scheduled task on all your endpoints in a matter of minutes. You can add this to the machines, all right, whatever the name is that you're looking for the name of that scheduled task that's being dropped, and you can immediately find it anywhere in your environments. You can also, we'll go back to since this is a little bit more topical and recent, the Hive vulnerability that was introduced into all Windows OS builds since, I believe, 1803. Where there are incorrect read permissions applied to your registry Hive files underneath the system. Well, that's a big, no, that is a bad thing, because whatever is kept in those Hive files, such as databases and passwords and hashes and other things, you do not want a hacker who has compromised a system to have access to that type of information, so they can, use that to further make lateral movements or further compromises in the environment. So Microsoft is fixing that problem with us now that somebody pointed it out. But, well, now that that vulnerability has been introduced into the wild, and it has been introduced into the wild since 1803, Windows 10, well, you probably want to monitor for it. So we already have that in here. We have a monitor in here for monitoring your registry settings to say, hey, is there a read permission set on here that shouldn't be here, that needs your attention? So we have these types of things. And again, this goes back into the hardening story of, well, how am I supposed to know I was supposed to monitor for this in the first place? Well, you've got kind of three avenues. You just, you don't know about it and you ignore it. You find out about it some way and you search out the answer, and you can, all right, well, I can find the answer here and I can go apply it in my environments through RMM or N-Central and monitor for it. Or the third option is, well, I'm not going to bother with it. I'm going to contract, where you have skill gaps, you may have to go find it somewhere else. Go bring in a third-party MSSP or a SOC or NOC solution, because they are going to have this as part of what they are looking for. So, that is yes, there is a significant cost associated with that, But if you try to replace that service with raw labor to make it manually happen, or even to customize the RMM or N-Central to have all the possible service monitors you could absolutely possibly need for anything, that's a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of payroll that would probably have been better spent by augmenting what you're doing with that other solution. I like to think of RMM and N-Central as toolboxes that can give you threshold monitoring for a lot of very important things, but it's threshold monitoring, it's not correlation, it's not security analytics. If you need that level, you have to bring in different tools. A question that came in is, does risk intelligence find this type of vulnerability? No, it does not. Risk intelligence is almost purely data discovery. It's built to help you discover sensitive data, PII information that is at rest on a system in locations it should not be in unprotected formats. It does have the extended data breach risk scan that does have some vulnerability checks in it. It looks to see if your system has accounts older than 90 days, if the password is not set, if the screensaver is not enabled, if the auto timeout for terminal services is too high. They do have a lot of those checks in there, but it is not a giant comprehensive list. I like to think of it as a great discovery tool that's relatively inexpensive that you can go out to a prospect, run it, get some good information back with only spend a couple of bucks to do it, and maybe an hour of a tier one technician's time to do it, and then you have plenty of ammo to go back, turn around, and make some initial proposals with. All right, so another thing that before we break away from the automation manager, since again this is a big thing and then a big part of how you expand, automate, and scale yourself. I also help out partners, and if you want a little bit of help with this and you want to go back and forth a few times on it, don't hesitate to reach out to me. But I also have a habit of creating, we're going to go to, I have a habit of also creating out monthly maintenance routines. So there we go. So as an MSP, anything you can automate is labor and payroll you don't have to expend. So I used to sneaker net this. I used to go to a client and run in a circle for 2.5 hours. Excuse me, I need to do something. Excuse me, can I do this? Excuse me. To have, well, we were big about FaceTime. We wanted clients to see that we were doing things. We wanted to prove our worth, and that was one of the ways that we did it. But you run yourself ragged and you are not efficient at what you're doing whenever you do that. So what we did is I created a maintenance routine where I have the automation manager do a lot of those repetitive tasks that I was doing myself. Because anything you can automate, again, that's payroll you don't have to pay out. So something simple like deleting temporary files. Okay, cool, we'll delete those out, nothing too special, but then we'll run Clean Manager. So Clean Manager EXE, clean out some more things specifically. Empty the recycling bin, flush the DNS cache. Again, that was an old habit of mine. Is it worthwhile? Do you have to do it? Personal preference. But then I have a PowerShell script that I've brought in here. So Automation Manager has tons and tons and tons of objects and options over here on the left that you can use to drag and drop and build scripts. But we're not going to have everything for all situations in here. So that is the purpose of the PowerShell object, so that you can bring in a PowerShell script that does the thing you need and just put it in line with the other tasks that you're trying to achieve. So this is one that I wrote myself that runs SFC scan now, puts that output somewhere so that we can judge it and say that, well, if SFC failed to fix something, run DISM restore health to try and fix that, straighten it out, and then rerun SFC scan now again. And this is something that I like to do. I really liked to do it on a repetitive basis for clients on, at least twice a year. But again, that meant I had to start SFC scan now, wait for it to finish, see the results, figure out, see if it said it couldn't fix something, then run DISM, restore health, and then wait for that, and then run the SFC scan. And that's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. If you're on a slow platter drive, it's going to take 4 hours. So it's a lot of time that goes into doing that. If we can transition that just out into an automated task, then that is 10, 15, 20 minutes per computer per client you're able to reclaim, automate, and still charge for. And then the way I'm doing this, and this is advanced options, you can check this out if you want to go check the automation boot camps are where you're going to want to go for this. But what I'm doing is I'm storing some of these information as a flag in a registry key so that I can check that with a check somewhere else to see if SFC did fail to fix something, I know about it. And then it just goes through with the logic for that, and then it sets up a check disk and then restarts the system. And again, this is 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes of work, of services that you can still charge for that is now automated. So you now have all kinds of flexibility that you may not have beforehand. You can now say, well, I'm going to include this in all of my managed services contracts as a value add because, well, it doesn't cost me anything to deliver it anymore. Or you can say, well, hey, I'm going to use this to justify an increase in margins because now that now that it does not cost me anything to do this, I don't have to worry about trying to make big enough margins on it. So I can afford to do this and just make an extra 60 cent an endpoint for it. And then you've also got on the sales, some more sales side of that is, well, since it is automated and you do not have to do it, since you don't have to do it, well, why do it monthly? Let's do it weekly. Let's charge if we're going to do it weekly, or let's just bang on that sales drum of, hey, we're so good, we're so efficient at this, and we love what we do so much, we don't do monthly maintenance, we do weekly maintenance, and we don't charge you anything extra for it. So there's all kinds of benefits that are not just the technical benefits, but the business benefits that can come out of starting to automate things. And that is one of the large stories and the angles that is being pushed by almost everybody in the MSP space right now is automation, automation, automation. And if you've heard them talk about that and it didn't really click what they meant by automation, this is what they're talking about. It's not these giant complex automation things that they're referring to. It's all of these small, tiny things that you can line up and make them fall as dominoes so that once it is done and you don't have to reinvest the time in it to keep it going. All right, so haven't seen any other questions come in recently, so we're going to skip on to the next part. So this is ongoing improvements. So this is a never-ending task. It is something you're going to have to always adjust, keep up with, learn, continue education, homework, however you want to do it, however you want to pursue it, however you want to think of it. It does not end. You have to keep doing more all the time. It is a mountain, not a molehill. Tackling cybersecurity, vulnerability management, the monitoring you have to do, system hardening task, and the regular daily support calls is a monumental task. And you may not have the resources to do all of them, let alone the ability to do all of them at 100%. So you have to be able to recognize when you're falling behind, when your services and your businesses are suffering, so that you can, just suck it up, take the hit to your ego and say, all right, I need help. We need external people to come in and help facilitate our next growth steps. And partnering with an MSSP is a good way of doing that. A lot of smaller MSPs there are a lot of smaller MSPs that are very hesitant to be involved with an MSSP because they see them as a shark patrolling the water that is just eager to take their clients away from them. And that is not how most MSSPs operate. Most MSSPs do not want to do day-to-day support. They do not want to get help desk calls because somebody's Outlook is displaying the wrong font. That's not what they're there for. They are not interested in that type of relationship with your clients. They are more interested in the relationship with you to sell through their services to you. And basically kind of the same angle you're taking of buy this thing for me, give me a bunch of money for it, but bother me as little as possible about it. So partnering with an MSSP can get you access to a lot of these things, to the additional monitoring, to the IOC hunting, to system hardening, to all those things without you having to go through the process of doing it yourself. Knox as a service and SOX as a service is another thing. They're not going to steal they are not there to steal your client base. They are there to offer a specific service. Also, red teams. It is one thing to have a checklist and go down it and say you've done all those things. It is something else completely different to have that tested by an outside party. So having a red team or a security consultant come in and test your defenses, test your infrastructure, show you where your shortcomings are, where they were, basically just where were they able to overcome the defenses that you have in place. And it's not, again, this is not one of those things that I'm telling you should go sign a contract with a red team service and do monthly exercises. No, this is something that you probably, if you can do it yearly, great. If you can only afford to do it one time, well, that's still great. Let them point out the deficiencies in what you're doing, not just in the tools and the technology you're using, but also in your internal processes, and take that information, turn around, make the improvements, and leave that engagement stronger for it. So, and why, back to why partner with an existing MSSP? So another part of that conversation is cost and time to market. If you decided that you were going to take on a client that said, we need 24/7 SOC services, you can do that yourself. It might take you too long to be able to build that capability up, though. You also probably will not have the money and the payroll available to be able to hire enough people that are qualified to man a SOC. A good security analyst, and good is that's a variable degree of quality there, but a good security analyst is going to be somewhere between $60,000 to $90,000 in most markets. And if they're a really good security analyst, they're going to demand much more than that. So just staffing alone is a big barrier. I mean, chances are for my smaller MSPs that are here today, I feel your pain. I was in that space same time going, who the hell can afford to pay somebody $90,000 a year? I'm only pulling, $60,000 of profit out of this business myself. So this can be an unsurmountable thing for you. If it is, that's just another notch in why you need to engage with an MSSP. Also, time to market. Even if you do have the money to throw at this, it's a venture acquisition, whatever, and all of a sudden you've got an influx of money and you've got enough to build this up yourself. Well, you're going to have to hire at least 3 people so that you can keep a good rotation on staff. But if you only got 3 SOC analysts, you're going to burn them out in a matter of time. They're going to be ill-tempered and not happy with what they're doing. So you're probably going to need closer to 4 to 5. So that's 5 people's payrolls that you've added. And then time to market. I have worked with larger MSPs that have implemented their own SOC service. And yes, they had a few missteps and they had some learning curves that they had to get over. But by the time they did it and they had it fully stood up and operational, they were 2 years in and had spent $2 million. And just to think about that, how long are they going to have to run that before they recoup that cost? It's going to be a while. And they're going to have to do it at large scale in order for it to be able to be a feasible business venture. So There are a lot more marks in the column of why you should engage with an MSSP than why you shouldn't. So segmentation of duties, this has come up a few times on some discussions about some other items here and there. But, and yes, I fully realize that if you're a one-man operation, segmentation of duties is something that you cannot even entertain of being able to achieve. But it is something you should be aware of, know it exists, why it exists, what the benefits of it are. So as you grow and expand, you can plan for it. So the whole premise of segmentation of duties is you're reducing risk, you're reducing attack surfaces if you segment the responsibility of people, make sure that they have the permissions they need only to be able to achieve that particular role or function. And the reason why is, what I've got listed up here. No one person should carry a project from inception to completion. Doesn't mean that one person can't do all of the implementation of a project, but someone else should be involved or responsible for the initial design and the final write-off of its completion. And lots of reasons why. It can reduce the opportunities for unforced errors. If you have a technician that's doing from beginning to end everything involved in a single process, and they're the only person that's ever doing it, and they're always doing it, there's not another set of eyes verifying what they're doing. And that allows an opportunity for misconfigurations to slip through and provide an unforced error in an environment. So back to having, you have a client that's not on a domain, they're on work group computers, and I'm a technician and I go out and it's onboarding time, and all right, we're going to set up file sharing for you. We don't know what the previous arrangements were, so we're just going to wipe out everything and we're going to go to your file share server. We're going to share those files folders. We're going to put read write access for an administrator account. And then I'm going to go to your computers. I'm going to map those folders and I'm going to log in with that administrator credential everywhere, and bam, the job's done and I'm out in 30 minutes. Problem with that is that is nowhere near best practice, and you have just introduced all types of attack vectors for the environment, because now you have admin credentials that are cached locally on every system in the environment that's using those file shares. And if those systems are compromised, it makes lateral movements even more trivial and ransomware attacks even easier to perform. So not only is there well, somebody shouldn't be doing that in the first place. Where how do you check for that? Well, you're going to have to check for that by making sure one person isn't the only person dealing with it. You need to have some way of verifying, auditing that. And you may be using some tools to do that verification and auditing, but someone else still needs to be the person that says, yep, it was done the right way. It makes audits more reliable because, again, somebody else is looking over what was done. If I am if I'm a systems engineer and I've just gotten done configuring a bunch of network infrastructure or an SD-WAN or whatever, and I'm just going to go through my, yep, I did this, yep, I did this, yep, I did this. I'm going to just go check, all these things were taken care of. I may not think about it too hard about, well, did I really do it? But if another person comes in and has to verify this, well, they're going to go, well, did you do this? Let me go check. Did you do this? Let me go check. Did you do this? Let me go check. So it can make your audits of your processes and your work much more reliable. Makes it less likely that corners are going to be cut, because, well, if somebody knows that the work they did is up to be verified by somebody else, they are not going to cut corners just to get it done faster. Well, they're less likely to cut corners to make it get done faster. It can help eliminate internal conflicts of interest. It can be expensive to implement this, because I am asking you to say, hey, add extra hours of work to your day and figure out where you're going to fit that into payroll. But you may already be doing this in some way, and it's just time to formalize it. If you are, if you've got a help desk team or you've got technicians and they're churning over multiple tickets a day, and you're going back and you're going back and you're reviewing those tickets, not for the work, but just to make sure our clients are being charged the right amount for the work that's being done. Lots of operations managers do this, business owners and MSP president, a lot of them do this. We like to optimize things. We like to make sure we're getting paid for the work that we've done. So you're probably already reviewing these things. Just add a few extra steps to it to say, well, we're not just going to make sure the payment was right. We're also going to make sure that the work was right. Um, and allows individuals to excel in their responsibilities. Once somebody has a defined role, they know what that role is, what is expected of them, and they know that they can be spot checked at any point in time for what they're doing. It's not about micromanaging what they do. It's about instilling the sense that everything has a way it's supposed to be done. And if it's not done that way, you're just going to have to go back and do it anyway. So do it right the first time, and they'll just get better and better at that established way of doing it. Another part of continuing, improving as you go, to continuing education. The whole nothing is ever finished. You always have to stay aware of new things that are happening. So sign up for alerts for recent vulnerabilities and emerging threats. Sign up for the DHS and the FBI advisories and the US CERT, CISA ones. These are great to see what the official public messaging is around this, because if they're saying this, then it's going to make the news and somebody's going to read about it somewhere probably. So you need to be prepared to answer the questions regarding these types of things. But government organizations and large organizations move a little bit slower compared to the breakneck speed of malware campaigns and cyber attacks. So augment that with reliable private sector news. Find who you want to follow, and there are a lot of options out there. And again, if you have the PDF, the handout today, there are some cybersecurity news links in here that are pretty useful to get started with. Krebs on Security, security journalist, writes lots of great articles, great content. If you find that you're struggling to write blog posts or generate content for your marketing campaigns, this is a great source of finding well-researched, talked about security events or threat events in the industry. Bleeping Computer is a great place to stay apprised of whatever is happening just about anywhere in the world. You can have a vulnerability being reported by a private security researcher at 6 o'clock in the morning. You'll have a post about it on Bleeping Computer in the afternoon sometimes. So find those private sector news sources you can follow, because again, keeps you aware, keeps you abreast of things that are happening. You're going to be a little bit less to be surprised about things, but it also helps you have another source, another funnel for content if that's something that you struggle with. So we're going to, and also of course, what are the resources that we're adding to? And oh yeah, here's a great one for my ages. I'm going to show my age a little bit here, but I remember before RSS feeds were even a thing. But for anybody that is not subscribed to some good RSS feeds, go find you some good RSS feeds and subscribe to those, and just keep that knowledge constantly coming to you. For us internally here at Enable, what do we have available that we are providing you with? So we have the boot camps. We have the security and our other blogs that we were writing, the cookbook, the office hours. And again, all of these things are listed here in the PDF handout with links to everything. So the uptime status and release notes, if just talking about RSS feeds, if you're not subscribed, go subscribe to these. There's also a link here to go check out all of our upcoming boot camps, our upcoming office hours, little intros for each one of the head nerds, and each one of the head nerds is a subject matter expert in whatever their title is. So me, security, Eric Harless is our backup and data protection. Stephanie Hammond is our business and marketing. Mark Andre is our automation and optimizations. And then we have Jason Murphy, who is our Enable head nerds. Because, well, Enable is a challenging system. It is big, it is robust, it can do all kinds of things. And, well, you need help with it sometimes. So that's the reason why we have a dedicated head nerd for that as well. But these links in here, make sure you have them. Check out the office hours. Check out the boot camps. Those are resources we're making available for a reason. And also, if you want to see any backlogs of previously done boot camps, we have those available again on the success.n-able site. If you go to the MSP Institute, you'll be able to see any of our previous boot camps we have recorded. They're broken down into categories as well as by the head nerd that led them. But it's here underneath MSP Institute. If you do not have login information for the MSP Institute, reach out to whoever your sales contact is, your partner success manager, let them know so they can help you get access to it. Or if somebody in your organization already has an account here, then they may have permissions to add you themselves. But the MSP Institute, lots of great pre-recorded content into here, how-tos, and it's categorized by individual products, business training, also based on the courses that the individual head nerds are putting out. So great resource, a lot of additional learning in here. And if you set this up, you can even dictate that, all right, you want your technicians to go through these courses. You can set that up for them. We're hitting close to the end of our time today. We only got about another 15 minutes left. We are going to drop a poll real quick because, well, we need feedback. We need to know how we're doing. Is this useful? Should we continue doing it? Do we need to modify it? So got a poll question up. It's just a straight 5-to-1 rating. How useful was the session? 1 for not useful at all, 5 for very useful. Give us some feedback. Let us know there. And if there is something that we didn't cover today and I didn't mention it in any of the upcoming boot camps, reach out and let us know. Again, my information is in the PDF handout. So if you want to reach out and say, hey, are you going to be covering such and such in the future? I'll be able to, yep, we are. No, we're not. But you know what? I'll sit and I'll have a conversation with you right now about it. So again, much appreciated for anybody that can answer the poll question for us. Again, the more feedback we get, the more, well, honestly, just the more positive feedback we get that we're doing something well, the more resources that they will give my team and the more of these things that we can do and the more that we can help out our partners. So I have not seen any additional questions coming in that I have not answered so far. If I missed your question, go ahead and throw it back into the questions and I can answer it here in the last little bit of time that we have. But we've covered the full content today. This has been meant to be a boot camp to help you find your feet and find a direction to start moving in. There's just a lot to this. Being an MSP and being an MSP that is doing what you do well is not an easy task, because if it was an easy task, well, then MSPs would not be needed and everybody would just have their own internal IT department that consisted of that guy that knows how to reload a computer and a $40 router from Walmart. So this is a challenge. It is a challenge that you can overcome. It is a challenge that you can conquer and do very well in. MSP is a booming business. But if you're going to stay relevant, if you're going to stay up to date with it, and you're going to continue to grow, you are going to have to begin to put more effort into the security realm. So thank you everybody for filling out the poll. If you haven't, encouraging you very much, please fill that out. It has been a pleasure. I'm glad to have seen that we had as many people attend today as we did. This will be recorded. This is recorded and it should show up in the MSP Institute in a few days or a week. Make sure that, if you have other people on your team, say if you're heavy on the technical side, you're maybe just the lead help desk technician, and you think that somebody else in your organization needs to hear some of these things, do not hesitate to say, hey, there was a lot of great information that I went over, and some of it was even business related. And I think there's really a lot of opportunities for us to really expand what we're doing, increase our margins, and just make our life better. Why don't you go watch this? So don't hesitate to spread this knowledge within your organization, because somebody here has a counterpart in your organization that is a challenge, that knows what should be done, how it should be done, and you can't gain any ground with them. This is just one more resource that's available that you can use to kind of start those conversations about why things need to change. It's been a pleasure, everybody. I haven't seen any other last second questions come in, but thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you on those future boot camps. Highly encourage everybody to sign up for the cybersecurity building to a cybersecurity framework boot camp that's going to be coming out soon, as well as we will be doing an EDR focused boot camp later in, I believe, September maybe, where we will be going over, how can you push the limits of the EDR product? How can you take, we're selling you EDR Sentinel-1 as a endpoint detection and response platform, but you've got the opportunity to turn around and then sell it to your clients as a managed detection and response, because you are the ones delivering the managed part of it. And if you've looked at any MSP marketing recently, managed MDR is a buzzword that's everywhere. They've even started now using XDR for extended detection and response. Slightly different things, but hey, if it's getting people's attention and you can offer an equivalent for it yourself, it's worth exploring if it is something that's within your wheelhouse to be able to do, because selling just regular EDR is a better AV. If you're making a $2 margin on it, great. But if you're selling EDR as a managed detection response solution, you just upped it to, oh, yeah, we're making 10, 20, 30, $40 of margin per endpoint because of it. So there's a lot to explore there. And if you're interested in it, make sure you join that boot camp whenever we put it up. Again, pleasure, everybody. Have a good afternoon.